Have you ever felt abandoned, lost, hopeless? Can you imagine being left behind in a remote place, only with your children, and the feeling that everything is lost? But what if I told you that abandonment could be the best favor of your life? This is the story of a woman who, despite the pain and loneliness, discovered her true strength and rebuilt her life from scratch. If you have touched your heart, subscribe now so you don't miss the stories that can change your perspective of life. We wait for you. The sun was just starting to set when I saw Daniel's car moving away, taking all my hope with it. That noise of the tires against the ground, further and further away, resonated in my mind like a sentence. He left me with the children, as if we were a nuisance, in the middle of nowhere. No direction, no future. We had lived a lie, and now, finally, everything had collapsed. Daniel was always the perfect man in my head. A loving husband, an exemplary father, or at least that's what I thought. But lies have a way of coming to light, like the water that finds its way through cracks. It was a conversation any afternoon that made everything collapse. The doubts grew like a shadow in my heart until, finally, I confronted the truth. He had betrayed me. Not only me, but everything he thought we were. The worst of all was not finding out about his infidelity. But when I looked him in the eye, I understood that there was no love left. There was nothing left between us, just an emptiness that seemed to him to desire more than anything. After a discussion that left us exhausted, he told me something that I will never forget. I have left you the best that I can offer you. Now learn to live without me. And he did. He left, leaving us behind, the 3 little ones who still did not understand what was happening, and me, who had a broken heart, but with a burning fury that pushed me to do something with all that. The car disappeared in the distance, and for a moment I stayed there, motionless, looking at the horizon. The wind was blowing hard, as if nature were also trying to tear me to tears that I did not want to let fall. I felt trapped. The world seemed so big, and I so small. But for some reason, something inside me told me that I could not stay there, waiting for someone to come to rescue me. There was no time to wait. "It's just a bad time, Mom," said Valentina, the oldest, with her soft voice. I had always been the most mature, as if she wanted to protect me. I took the children by the hand, looking towards a future, which had no shape yet, but which was already mine to build. The fog began to rise between the distant mountains. The air was cool, but life went on. And something inside me told me that, although everything seemed to be in ruins, there was still a flash of hope. Abandonment would not be the end. I knew it in the depths of my being. I was about to start a journey, one that would teach me more about myself and what really matters. The first step was to accept the truth, no matter how painful it was. Now I was alone, but not empty. The days were lengthening like a tense rope about to break, and the stillness of that place, which had once seemed beautiful to me, now dazzled me. The sound of the children playing was the only thing that broke the absolute silence that surrounded us. But even his laughter, which had once seemed a balm for the soul, began to have a melancholy tint. How could I be happy in a place so far from everything, so far from the comforts, from the life that I once knew? At first, I tried to keep myself busy. I cleaned, cooked, did everything possible to maintain the routine, as if somehow, by clinging to normality, I could remove the sadness. But each task reminded me of what I had lost. There were no more conversations with Daniel at the end of the day, or plans for the future. There was only me and my children, who did not fully understand what had happened. Valentina, at 10, was already beginning to realize the gravity of the situation. She looked at me with a mixture of concern and sadness. Sometimes, she asked me if she felt that I was no longer the same. At first, she tried to give them answers, but in the end, there was only silence. My heart was full of unanswered questions, and none of them seemed to make sense. The other 2, Samuel and Laura, were smaller, and they did not understand what was happening. They played among themselves, running through the field, alien to the reality that enveloped me. Sometimes, she asked me if her innocence was what kept me standing, because seeing them so happy, so full in their world, made me think that perhaps all this had not been a mistake. Maybe, just maybe, there was something else I could learn from this situation. The nights were the most difficult. Darkness fell quickly, and with it, my mind overflowed with dark thoughts. The memory of Daniel, his indifference, his cold words, hit me mercilessly. But for some reason, something inside me refused to give in. The anger I felt towards him pushed me to fight, not to remain still in despair. One night, while the children were sleeping, I went outside. The sky was starry, and the stillness of the place was deep. I sat on a rock and looked into infinity. In the distance, the mountain seemed an impenetrable wall, but despite the darkness, I felt a small spark of something that I had not seen before. When I looked at them, they reminded me that although everything seemed broken, there was still beauty in what surrounded me. It was at that moment that I understood something crucial. The place was not hurting me, nor the silence, nor the loneliness. What was really breaking me apart was the way I saw it all. I had gotten used to waiting for someone to come to save me, for something to change by magic. But that was the lie that had dragged me to that point. Nobody would come. I had to do it myself. At dawn, the sun began to rise slowly, illuminating the horizon, and with that light, something inside me also began to shine. Despair still accompanied me, but I no longer saw it as an enemy. It was part of the transformation that I needed to live. Every day, even if I felt lost, it was an opportunity to find myself. And in that silence, in that emptiness, I began to discover my own strength. The days were transforming little by little. The struggle to find a balance between pain and the need to move on became my new routine. At first, it seemed to me that life had given me a blow that I could not get up from. But what I discovered, in an almost imperceptible way, is that within that were the hardest. I often woke up in the middle of the night, unveiled by anxiety, with the memories of what I had lost hitting me like implacable waves. But over time, something began to change. The emptiness I felt did not disappear immediately, but I did begin to see it in a different way. I no longer felt victim of the circumstances. I began to accept it. The day I decided that things had to change was a gray day, almost as if heaven knew what was about to happen. I was on the porch, watching the children run around the house, when suddenly, something pushed me to get up and enter the house. I walked toward the room I shared with Daniel, which now felt empty and alien. I looked at his things, still there like a ghostly presence, and I understood it. All that had to go. With a determination that surprised me, I began to pack his things. Somehow, that action was a symbolic act of liberation. By putting his belongings in boxes and moving them outside the house, I was emptying the space not only of his things, but of all the emotional load that had been weighing on me. Despite the sadness that enveloped me, I felt a slight sense of relief. Valentina approached me, and with her eyes full of curiosity, she asked me what I was doing. I looked at her. For the first time since the abandonment, I smiled at her. "I'm getting rid of myself, daughter," I replied, without knowing what it meant, but feeling that it was the right thing. Life, like the house, needed a change. I could no longer cling to what had been, because what had been no longer existed. Instead of continuing to look for what I had lost, I began to look at what I still had: my children, my health, the land that surrounded us. I was in the middle of nowhere, yes, but I was also in the middle of everything that really mattered. The following days I spent reorganizing the house, fixing the garden, cleaning the corners that we had left aside. Each task, small as it was, gave me a sense of purpose. I was no longer lost in despair, but I was beginning to find my place, my rhythm. The children, who before only saw a sad mother, began to notice the change. I no longer spoke to them with sadness, but with hope, and although sometimes uncertainty invaded me, my heart began to beat harder. One afternoon, while planting some plants in the garden, Valentina approached me with a smile on her face. He looked at me with a new expression, as if he saw me in a different way. "Mom, I think you're doing well," he said, as I reached the shower. His words touched me in a profound way. I knew that, although there was still a lot to do, I had taken the first step toward a future that, for the first time, did not terrify me. I had stopped looking at the past, and instead, I began to see what I could build with what I had in front of me. The sun began to set, dimming the sky in golden and pink tones. I felt at peace. Perhaps I did not know where life would take me, but now I understood that the true journey was not toward the future, but towards my interior. This was a new beginning, and I felt ready to live it. Every day I spent in that distant place gave me a different lesson. Sometimes small, sometimes as big as a revelation. The routine was no longer just a way to survive the day. It had begun to become an opportunity to discover myself. It was not just a mother facing adversity, but a woman who was beginning to understand her own strength. The first days of anguish had already been left behind, and although the sadness had not gone completely, I had learned to live with it. Sometimes I accepted it, sometimes I challenged it, but above all, there was something that was forming within me, a silent determination. I was taking control of my life, one day at a time, and every step I took drew me closer to the person I was destined to be. One day, as I was walking to the nearby field, I heard a low and heavy sound that made me stop. It was the sound of a tractor wheel that, apparently, had stopped halfway. I looked ahead and saw an older man, covered in dust and with his shirt torn, struggling to repair his machine. At that moment, I did not think about it. I walked towards him, and with a smile, I offered him my help. I had seen Daniel repair machinery in the past, and although I had never done it myself, I knew I could try. It was a kind of task that, at first glance, seemed out of my reach, but something inside me told me that I should try. The man looked at me with surprise, but accepted my offer. At first, I was nervous. My hands trembled as I took the tools, but something inside me lit up. The adrenaline of doing something I had never done before, and doing it well pushed me to move on. I felt alive in a different way. It was not just because of what I had done, but because of what it meant. I was no longer being defeated by fear. After a while, the tractor started working again. The man, visibly impressed, thanked me and offered me a fresh drink. At that moment, I realized something important. The ability to face challenges did not depend on the skills I had, but on my willingness to try. When I returned home, Valentina looked at me with curiosity. I smiled and told her what had happened. She hugged me and told me, "Mom, you're amazing." Those words touched me deeply, and I understood that what I had been looking for all the time was not just a way to move on, but the inner strength that I had never recognized in myself. Over the next few weeks, I discovered that there was more inside me than I imagined. Not only was I able to repair things, but also to face my own fears. Each task, however small it was, became a way of gaining confidence. The hands that used to only serve to care for my children now repaired, built, sewed. And each of those little victories made me feel stronger. My life did not depend on the circumstances, nor on the people who had left me. It depended on me. And somehow, I felt that in that remote corner of the world, I had found something much more important than the comfort of the city or the presence of someone who would rescue me. I had found my own strength, my ability to move on for myself and for my children. At first, I had thought that I was alone. Now I knew that, somehow, I had never been. The force had always been inside me. I just needed to believe in it. The future was still uncertain, but now I faced it with renewed confidence. And best of all, it is that I had not only discovered my own strengths, but also the ability of my family to heal and grow. With each step I took, I got closer to the life that I really wanted for us. When I decided that the best thing was to face it all alone, I did not really know what that decision meant. At first, I thought that loneliness was an enemy. I thought that being without anyone by my side was the worst thing that could happen to me. But as the days passed, I realized that sometimes what we fear most is precisely what we need to grow. Loneliness, at first, embraced me with a feeling of emptiness and despair. The moments when the children slept were the worst, because the house became an echo of what it once was. Daniel's memories of how he used to share the space with him invaded me in silence. But as the months passed, I began to see loneliness from a completely different perspective. It was no longer the emptiness that I feared, but an opportunity. Loneliness became my teacher, and through it, I began to discover things that I had never understood. I learned to listen to my own thoughts, my desires, and my fears. There were no distractions anymore. I was completely alone with my emotions, and although at first that terrified me, Soon I understood that only by facing those feelings could I find peace. There was so much that I had needed and desired. How many times I had sought the approval of others, especially Daniel. Now, without anyone around me, I realized how easy it is to get lost when you live only for others. Unintentionally, I had let the lives of others take control of mine. But in loneliness, I learned to reconnect with what I really wanted, with what really made me happy. The children were my company, yes, but loneliness allowed me to be a more conscious, more present mother. Without the distractions of normal life, I was able to see them in a different way, not only as my children, but as unique beings with their own worlds, their own thoughts. I learned to listen more attentively to their laughter, their questions, their fears. It was in the stillness of the lonely days that I was able to connect with them in a deeper way, without interference, without rush. And in that space of calm, I discovered something powerful. The love I felt for them was not only the love of a mother, but a collective force that united us in our vulnerability. One afternoon, while we were sitting together under the tree, Valentina looked at me with a mixture of affection and curiosity. "Mom, how are you so calm?" she asked me, her voice soft but full of wisdom for someone so young. The answer I did not know at all, but I felt that something had changed inside me. I looked at the children, then at the sky, and with a smile, I replied, "I think tranquility comes when you stop waiting for others to give it to you. You find it when you decide to be enough for yourself, no matter what happens." That answer, although simple, made me realize that loneliness had not been a punishment, but a gift disguised. It had shown me the truth behind what I really needed, what I really wanted to be, and most importantly, it had taught me that true peace does not depend on having someone else, but on finding harmony within oneself. At that moment, loneliness stopped being my enemy. She became my companion, and together, we learned to walk a path that, although uncertain, no longer scared me. In the stillness, in the space between words and thoughts, I understood that I had found a much greater force than any company, the peace that is found when one learns to be complete with oneself. The future was still uncertain, but with loneliness by my side, I no longer feared what would come. Life went on, and I was ready to embrace it, with or without company, because, in the end, what I had discovered was that the most important company is the one that one offers oneself. It was a random afternoon when, after weeks of living with an almost monotonous routine, something unexpected happened. A figure appeared on the horizon, walking toward the house. At first, I thought it was a traveler or some nearby neighbor, but as he approached, my heart took a small turn when I recognized him. He was a middle-aged man, with a face marked by the passage of time and a gaze full of untold stories. I was surprised to see someone so far from the life that we had built there. The man reached the threshold of our house. When he saw me, he smiled in a somewhat shy way. "Sorry for the interruption," he said in a raspy voice. "My name is Ernesto. I come from a nearby town. I have heard of you, and I felt that perhaps I could help you with something." The truth is that at first I did not know what to think. My instinct told me that I should be cautious. I had learned to be, but something in his gaze made me trust, even if it was a little. Ernesto, apparently, had been looking for a place to find peace after going through his own traumas and losses, and for reasons that I still did not understand, he had felt a connection with my situation. We invited him to come in, and while we shared a cup of tea, he told me his story. He had lost his wife a couple years ago, and since then he had moved away from everything, looking for answers in loneliness, like me. His journey had brought him there, almost as if fate had guided him. As I listened to his story, I felt something strange. It was as if the universe was sending me a message. Why, of all places, had our little refuge appeared? Because now, when everything seemed so stable, so resolved in my life, but at the same time, I felt that it was not a coincidence. Something bigger was at stake. Ernesto spent several days with us, helping us in small jobs and sharing wisdom that he had not sought, but that seemed just what he needed to hear. He had a way of seeing life that made me think about everything that had happened. Sometimes, what hurts us the most is precisely what helps us grow, he told me one afternoon while we were repairing the roof of the house. Sometimes, all we need is to lose something to realize what really matters, he told me, while I watched the sunset dim the sky in red. It was true. Daniel's abandonment, loneliness, the fight, all that they considered a deep suffering, actually led me to a place that I never would have imagined. I had lost a lot, but I had also gained an inner peace that I would not have found otherwise. And when I met Ernesto, I realized that sometimes fate brings people to our lives at specific times, not only to help us, but to show us that what we think was a punishment is actually a disguised blessing. The days that Ernesto spent with us became a time of reflection through our conversations. I understood that fate, that mysterious force that leads us to certain moments and places, does not always follow a path that we can understand immediately. Sometimes, the answers we are looking for are right in front of us, but we can only see them when we stop to look. In his departure, Ernesto left me a letter with some words that I still keep in the back of my heart. Always remember that meetings are not coincidences. Life, with all its pain and beauty, has taken you to this point for a reason. Keep walking, because your journey is just beginning. When he left, I felt that something inside me had changed. It was no longer just a woman who had been abandoned and who now struggled to move on. Now I knew that life had a much greater purpose for me, something that I still did not fully understand, but that was beginning to dazzle. Perhaps what I needed most was not to be rescued, but to understand that the answers were already inside me, waiting to be heard. Fate had crossed our paths for a reason, and now, with that new perspective, I felt more prepared than ever to move on. Time had passed, and with it, life seemed to have found its course. But I had changed. I was no longer the same woman who had arrived at that place, overflowing with pain and despair. I no longer saw abandonment as a sentence, nor loneliness as a punishment. I had understood that, in some way, what I had lived had led me to the person I was today, and that person no longer feared what was to come. In fact, I began to understand that the future no longer depended on what I had lost, but on what I could create. The sun began to set over the mountains, bathing the horizon with its golden and warm colors. Valentina and the little ones ran to the garden, laughing without worries, while I sat on the porch, contemplating the vast landscape. Everything had changed, but in some way, it was exactly what I needed. The house, which used to seem empty and alien to me, was now a home full of life and meaning. I remember that moment as if it were yesterday, when I realized that, in reality, the greatest favor that Daniel had done to me when he left was not only the opportunity to find myself, but the space he gave me to discover the true meaning of freedom. Freedom not only of being alone, but being able to build, step by step, the life I had always dreamed of. Without him, without the expectations of others, I had found the strength to be who I really am. In the days that followed, I began to see clearly what really mattered. I was no longer trapped in the memories of the past or in the unanswered questions about what could have been. What had been, simply, no longer had power over me. Now, what mattered was what I was building for myself and for my children. A simple life, full of peace, but also of purpose. One afternoon, while we were sitting at the table, Valentina looked at me with her eyes full of gratitude. "Mom, I know everything has been difficult, but you know what? I'm happy here. And although at first I thought everything was going to be terrible, now I know that this is the best place for us." Those words filled my heart with a deep peace. Life had taken a radical turn, and although the pain never completely disappeared, it had given way to something much greater. I had learned to value every little moment, to find beauty in simple things, and see love in the eyes of my children. I had learned that true strength did not come from circumstances, but from a decision not to give up, to move on with faith and hope. What seemed like an end, in reality, was just the beginning of a new life. Abandonment, struggle, loneliness, all that had taken me to a place where I understood what it really meant to be free. It was not about running away from something, but about embracing what life had given me and using it to grow. I looked to the horizon once again, grateful for everything I had learned and for everything I had overcome. And I understood with a clarity that I had never had, that the best favor Daniel had done me when he left was not to leave us in the dark, but to give us the opportunity to discover that everything we needed to be happy was already within us. The future, although uncertain, was no longer scary to me. I was ready to receive it with open arms, because I had learned the most important lesson. Life always has something good reserved for those who dare to move on, even when everything seems lost. And so, with a calm smile, I got up from the porch, surrounded by my children, with the feeling that the journey that had begun in the darkness had finally come to light.